Pick up your gear and open your chests. Throw on your armor and head out on a quest. Hey, hey, it's a brand new day. On the Sword Coast, your allies will help with blazing bows and magic as well. Hey, hey, heroes on their way, fighting forever against overwhelming odds, fighting together in favor of multiple gods. Idle champions of the forgotten realms, idle champions, adventure never ends. Idle champions, hit you all at them. Idle champions, you will set again. Idle champions. From Waterdeep to Icewind Dale, head out to Chult or Shadowfell. Hey, hey, together we stay. Walk to the monsters, walk to the boss, walk to the right, it's never a loss. Hey, hey, bad guys to slay, fighting forever against overwhelming odds, fighting together in favor of multiple gods. Idle champions of the forgotten realms, idle champions, adventure never ends. Idle champions, hit you all out there. Idle champions, you will set again. Idle champions, idle champions, idle champions, idle champions.
No, there. Maybe it's working now. There we go. Oh, audio problems. That's what I get for updating OBS. Welcome, everybody. I am Gaarawarr of the Guides, and today we are back with another Gaarawarr's Guide, the tutorial show, which is the show where I talk about a specific topic for about an hour, give or take, and then answer questions. For the second part of the show, today's topic, it's a bit of a recap show. It's 2024 Champions Part 2, so we're going to talk about the featured champions from the last 3 events, which also means now the last 3 months. So we got 6 champions to talk about today. 5 of them are on the field at the moment. And helping me today, grabbing questions, watching over chat in the production booth is Gabe. Gabe's going to be watching over everything. Thank you, Gabe. In fact, I believe they've already set up our code for today, which is 2024 Champions Part 2. Part 2. See, look at that. It works. Yay. Get yourself an Electrum chest. All right. We got 6 champions to talk about, so we're going to dive right in. Just remember, if you have questions, like it says down there, please put question : in front of your question so that Gabe can grab it, because I won't probably be paying attention to chat for about an hour. That's kind of how this goes. All right. Let's get started. So the 6 champions that we're going to be talking about today, we're going to be talking about Gale. In the same seat 1, we're going to be talking about Ezmerelda here in a bit. We got Gromma, we got Penelope, we got Duke Ravengard, and we got Diana. Obviously, I have people in outfits because I love the outfits. Look, this is basically Penelope's default skin. There's Penelope normally. There's Penelope normally. Look, some skins I just prefer over. I just want that all the time. I just want that all the time. Does Gale have? Gale's got some stuff. Yeah, he's in the robe of the week. Oh, there's a casual one. Cool. All right, so let's dive in and talk about each of these champions. Start with Gale. Gale comes to us from Baldur's Gate 3. He's a member of the Absolute Adversaries. So Gale is one of the kind of oh, now I can't remember what they call them, but basically the characters, the origin characters, you can play as in the game, as well as, you know, you can play your own character, and then they can be a member of your party. We do have a lot of people in this affiliation. We currently have all of these origin characters in the affiliation, so this is a full affiliation. You can play as any combination of these. Much like in Baldur's Gate 3, though, they don't all necessarily work well together. You have to build a team that works for you, right? Gale's male human wizard, support debuff in rolls neutral, full neutral alignment. Gale attacks. Base attack is magical. That's this symbol here. Firebolt, they deal one hit to a random enemy, but they try to target enemies they haven't hit yet, and that's for reasons. For reasons. Not for raisins. For reasons. They have a passive ability called Ally of Elminster. That's what these level 0 abilities are. And which basically means Gale can go in any Elminster variant. So Elminster is one of our patrons. Here he is the end game patron. This is kind of what we're covering. Late game patron. All of these others, you know, you can unlock Mert in the early game, Vajra early to mid, you know, early to mid. But then this is late. This is late game patron. They're stuck. Look, it's Elminster, one of the most powerful wizards of all time, chosen of Mistra. Lived for centuries. If he's asking you to do stuff, it's gonna be difficult. It's gonna be difficult. So Gale can go in all of Elminster's stuff. So you'll always have a support champion in Gale to do that stuff with. Archmage's Insight is next up. This is their base buff. So they increase the damage of champions in the 2 columns in front of them by 1000%. I know I've got Gale in the front. So this is, if we go back, you can see the little green arrows pointing, hey, 2 columns in front. So you want, in their base functionality, you want them within 2 columns of the DPS. Remember, the columns are these up, down. This is columns. We don't really have rows because, I mean, you could kind of look at this would be a row, this would be a row, this would be a row, this would be a row. Like they're a little offset. So columns. Yeah. So 2 columns in front is the base functionality. There's ways we can adjust this. We'll talk about that in a second. Netherese Orb. This is the reason why their base attack is random and prioritizes different people. The first time Gale damages any enemy, that enemy takes additional damage from all subsequent attacks. So Gale applies a debuff once you unlock Netherese Orb. And they only have to hit an enemy once, and that enemy will be debuffed until they die. Yeah. So, yeah, that's why, you know, the whole prioritizing enemy they haven't hit yet is an important part of their kit. So they'll spread the debuffs around. But it is random, so, you know, if there's a lot of things on the screen, it may take a while to get to everybody, right? Specialization choices. This really changes the functionality of Gale in certain cases. We'll talk about this. But it really fits them to... It makes them a bit of a bit more adjustable to your formation, both in terms of the layout and the functionality. So Evocation, Gale's Firebolts, their base attack, will now deal damage to all enemies in a small area. So this is good if you know you're going to be pushing deep with Gale, and you're going to have a lot of enemies built up on your front line. This is going to apply the debuff as an AoE, so you're getting lots of people with it at once. Abjuration. So if you can place Gale in a formation, you know, the normal good placement for Gale for you is within 2 columns behind your DPS. You can. I tend to go for this because I want that AoE spreading. If I'm doing a deep push, right? Abjuration. Attacks against champions miss 50% of the time. Survivability feature. So if you know you're going into a fight where things are problematic, because notice there's no trigger here. It's just attacks against champions miss 50% of the time. If you're going into something very difficult where you're going to be taking a lot of damage from bosses, especially like AoE bosses that attack and damage the entire party, great survivability feature. It rolls individually for every single champion, so just a way for you to take about half of the damage, right? Half of the hits. Enchantment, this increases Archmage's Insight number of columns by 1. So if you're in a formation, like if this formation had a frontline DPS, like you were doing someone who was a tank DPS up here, but the best place, you had all the other columns full. You could extend Gale's range by that so that it would cover everyone. I mean, there's other scenarios for this. You could have more extended formation, and the best place for Gale is further back, and basically it's going to let you extend that column and let Gale buff even more columns, which can be great. So again, and sometimes it's functionality, sometimes it's fitting the formation. And Illusion, the final one that changes for your formation needs, Archmage's Insight now affects his column and the column behind. So at this point, then Gale could be in the same column as your DPS, or in front of your DPS if you choose this, right? So again, affords a different placement, a different ability for placement in the formation. But there's a second part. Enemies that attempt to choose Gale as a target, so they try to attack Gale, instead choose to attack another champion, assuming another valid target exists. And what this is referring to is the front line, usually. There are situations where you'll fight ranged enemies that attack anyone in the formation, and it's a way to keep Gale from being attacked, sure. But what this usually is we call them kind of an anti-tank or a nega-tank, where basically you put them in the front column, and you put them in that spec, and when an enemy walks up or tries to shoot them, they're just going to shoot somebody else as long as there's another tank in the front line, as long as there's anyone else in the front line. It doesn't work in a single target front line, right? But a 2 or 3 target front line, enemies are going to attack someone else. They're going to walk, and if they're walking up, they're just going to walk to somebody else. So it's a way to kind of reduce your tank line by 1 and still get buffs, right? So we could put them here. Now anybody gets close or tries to attack, they're just going to attack Gromma instead, because Gromma is a valid target in the front line. And now Gale is buffing his column and the column behind. Right. So lots of great functionality adjustments in that first set of specializations for Gale. He can basically fit himself into any kind of formation and formation layout. Not any, but most formations and formation layouts. Ultimate attack is Gale's Gale. Sure. Gale casts Gust of Wind, knocking back all enemies. So this is a full screen knockback. Deals ultimate damage to all of them. So full screen hit, a single target hit, and then slows them all for 15 seconds. So this isn't going to do much while we're here on this level, but there you see the graphics with the wind going across. Just a good crowd control feature, which is survivability for your front line. Also, if you have anyone in your party that likes crowd control effects like slows on bunches of enemies, that's helpful too, right? Second set of specializations, we could get a bit more specific in how we buff. We have a Ceramorphosis, Mystical Mentor, and Finite Fellowship. Ceramorphosis is in all the other in all the other absolute adversaries. Is kind of a base ability, but Gale doesn't have it base because they want you to choose, do you want it or not? Like, are you building an absolute adversaries formation, or are you doing something else? So Gale's, you're spreading your functionality around to different types of Gale can fit in a lot more groups without necessarily sacrificing power, right? So Ceramorphosis, your formation gains 1 Tadpole stack. Due to the Mind Flayer Tadpole in Gale's brain, Gale increases the damage of Netherese Orb, that's the debuff, by an amount for each Ceramorphosis stack, and it stacks multiplicatively. So this is multiplicatively stacking with pre-stack multipliers. This is the OP way. This is super powerful. If you are building a absolute adversaries formation and you want Gale in it, you got a lot of Tadpole stacks, he's gonna build up a really strong debuff for you. Mystical Mentor, Gale increases the effect of Netherese Orb by an amount. For each champion in the formation with an intelligence of 13 or higher, Again, stacks multiplicatively. So you don't have to build an absolute adversaries formation for Gale. You could just build a formation of really smart people. And he's going to get the same kind of multiplier. Right? And Finite Fellowship Gale increases the effect of Netherese Orb by a small amount for each champion you have unlocked that is not eligible for the current adventure, and it stacks multiplicatively. Remember how we said Gale does Elminster stuff. Well, Elminster is arguably one of the more restrictive patrons in the game because he only allows champions that came out or arrived in an event or were reworked in an event in the last 3 years. This game's been out for coming up on 7 years. So there tend to be more champions that aren't allowed for Gale than are. And then on top of that, if you're doing a patron variant that's highly restrictive, this number can get real big. So because of the potential for this number to be really high on certain restrictive variants, this could become your choice, regardless of whether you're running absolute adversaries or just intelligent things. So what you're looking at between these two, you're looking at which one's going to give me the highest bonus, or is my DPS someone, or do I have a lot of absolute adversaries and tadpoles? Probably want to add another tadpole to everybody. Do I just have a lot of really smart people? There we go. Am I in an incredibly restrictive variant where this number is real big, and then you got to figure out the math yourself, right? In this case, we've just got some more intelligent people in the group, so we're going with that. We're not filling out a whole group anyway. An experienced sage is the follow-up that works along with Elminster. So he buffs his Archmage's Insight, that's his column buff, for each Elminster patron variant you've completed, and it stacks multiplicatively. So the more you go out and do with Gale, in terms of Elminster variants, the stronger he gets. And multiplicatively stacking is the OP way. Well, it's a good way. I don't think this one pre-stacks. No, it's a post. I don't even have to go look, but I'm gonna. Yeah, post-stack multiplier. So, Gale has a lot of multiplicatively stacking effects, and they can get real big. So that makes Gale real strong in Seat 1. There's multiple real strong champions now in Seat 1. It's kind of nice to have some competition and some options, or options if you want to look at it that way. Item-wise, we get damage all champions, we get Archmage's Insight. Netherese Orb, this is an important one because it's pre-stack multiplier. Experienced Sage, ultimate attack damage, and ultimate cooldown. And then over here, we get feat-wise, we get damage of all champions, Archmage's Insight, Netherese Orb, again, pre-stack multiplier, so that's good. Experienced Sage. Then we get some of the specialization choices, and these do affect the pre-stack multipliers, so these are big to have. These are very big to have if you're building large numbers of multiplicative stacks on that second specialization set. He also gets an immolation feat. These tend to be applied more thematically, so Gale deals with fire, let's give him something that causes enemies to burn. And because this applies bud damage every second for 5 seconds, this can be something that can help you destroy armor segments on bosses. So if you're dealing with an armored enemy, an armored boss, and you're just not killing it quick enough, maybe slot immolation so that Gale can help you burn through it. There are a couple feats available by doing from the patron shop for Elminster, so you've got to unlock those by doing Elminster variants to earn the influence, and then you can purchase them from that shop. One changes Gale's alignment to neutral good, which would then qualify him for patron Mert. Mert wants people to be good or evil. You got to pick a side for Mert, Are you fighting? Are you for us or against us? Okay, at least you made a decision. He doesn't like wishy-washy people. And another is just buffs Experienced Sage, which makes sense because that's the one that's the ability that's based off the number of variants you do, right? So that's Gale. Let's go ahead and swap in the same slot and talk about Ezmerelda. Take familiar off. There we go. Ezmerelda is a technically female human fighter wizard. They say human. She's Vistana. Let's be, you know, but it's human. Chaotic Good, support and debuff champion. No affiliation. She's basically a monster hunter. She is the monster hunter. She's a Vistana monster hunter. She's pretty great. She's pretty great. She's featured on Van Richten's one of Van Richten's guides in the cover. It should have just been called Ezmerelda's guide. She also attacks with a firebolt. She hurls it at a random enemy. There's no additional effects to that. At least there's not supposed to be. At the moment, or at least last I checked, it's considered a debuff for some reason. But yeah, it's not written that way. Ultimate is yeah, there's reasons. We'll get into her kit. I mean, I guess there's reasons, but it's, I don't know. It seems a little odd. It's not stated. Her ultimate is called My Signal. Esmeralda attacks the enemy with the highest health, greatly debuffing them. So she applies a huge debuff to whoever she attacks, and it's a big deal. It's a big debuff, folks. The debuff gets stronger with each debuff applied in the current area. So yeah, fully stacked, it can be huge. And she tracks debuffs in an area through one of her other abilities. Yes, preparation. So max is 100, and when it gets to 100 stack, that debuff is big. It's big. Training montage. Esmeralda marks enemies that she attacks, training other champions to spot their vulnerable points. There's the debuff, folks. So once you hit 30, the base attack has a debuff effect. Marked enemies take a bunch more damage from all champions for each debuff champion in the formation, stacking multiplicatively. So the more champions that have the debuff roll, the more she debuffs. And it stacks multiplicatively. So debuff formations rejoice. Now that doesn't necessarily mean anytime it says this, anytime they're talking about the number of champions in the formation. I mean, if you can build an amazing, strong formation with everyone qualifying for this, great. But most of the time, you're just trying to build the best possible formation and then seeing how many of these end up being debuffs. If there are roughly equal swaps you can have in a seat or whatever, and one of them has the debuff, then that's just going to make your formation better. But you know, you don't usually want to like butcher a formation by putting a debuff champion in it that isn't that great just because you want to get her another stack, right? And that goes for basically all champions. So test it, try it out, see if it helps. If not, go back to what you're doing, right? Preparation. Every time a debuff is applied to an enemy, the effective training montage is increased, stacking multiplicatively up to 100 times and resetting when changing areas. So this is an in-area ramping effect. So the longer it's taking you to clear an area, the more you're boosting your abilities. And then you clear the area and move forward. Now that should, hopefully, you carry some of that power with you in the sense that your bud, your base ultimate damage, that's being tracked down here, which is, you know, your important number, will have gone way up, and you can carry that into the next area with fire breath potions or abilities that are based on bud, right? You just have to build this back up again on every area. Threat tracking. Undead are Esmeralda's favored foes. So she's a favored foe champion and will fit into other groups that are favored, that feature favored foes. Whenever one of Esmeralda's favored foes are killed while she's in the formation, she tracks it, increasing the base effect of training montage by a very small amount for each favored foe killed. This is an additively stacking feature. That's why it's super tiny. These stacks persist for the adventure, but reset when you complete it. So, the more of her favored foes you're killing in an adventure, the stronger she gets. There is a cap. It's 1E05, so it's like 100,000. So you can cap this, I feel like, fairly easily, and we'll talk about there's ways to add more things that are her favored foes. But when you're dealing, if you're in places like Tomb of Annihilation, where there's tons of undead, she rocks, right? She's going to stack up real good. All right, specializations. We've trained for this Vampire Hunter or the Devil You Know. This really kind of fits the name of specialization for me. Like I like when specializations really target you towards specific things. So we saw that with one of Gale's first specialization, right? It really changes him and makes him specialize how he gets placed in a formation or what he's doing while he's in it. The same thing here. So we've trained for this. All champions will deal a lot more damage against enemies with armor, right? So she's an armor breaker. This increases their chance of breaking an armor piece. Yeah. Additionally, if it hits based, that's the ones that are segmented health, but it's just needs one damage apiece. Or armored enemy is affected by training montage. Successful hits against them remove an additional chunk, right? So not only is she helping you by being an armor breaker, by giving you more damage if you're fighting something that has armor, she's also what I call like an armor shredder, whereas she's giving you double credit against any kind of segmented health, really. So as long as you could remove a chunk of armor, you're going to remove 2 when she's in the formation. Okay. So yeah. That's real good. And if you have other champions in your formation that do this, that are armor shredders, that give you extra credit, they stack multiplicatively. So if you have Ezmerelda and, say, Human in the middle of the formation, because in the middle, Human will remove 2 segments on an armored boss, its bosses specifically, then when you hit once with 1 attack, instead of you will remove 4 segments. So it's the 2 from Esmeralda and the 2 from Human, and you get 4. There's my finger magic. Yeah. And if you have you add in like Celise has a feature that can give you triple credit, up to triple credit. Well, then that boosts you up to 12 segments. And if you stack that onto a DPS that has a multi-attack, then it's 12 segments per attack, right? So you can absolutely, Esmeralda is one of a handful of champions that you can just absolutely help use to shred through armored stuff very quickly. Vampire Hunter. The effective training montage is increased by a large amount on enemies who are one of Esmeralda's favored foes, and threat tracking counts each favored foe killed twice. So threat tracking is going to ramp up faster, and you do a lot more damage against favored foes. Now, again, it's undead by default. She has others she can add. So, if you are dealing with favored foes, if that is your big problem in an adventure, you choose Vampire Hunter. If you're dealing with armored stuff, and maybe lots of hit-based stuff, we've trained for this, but I mostly go for this for armor. The Devil You Know is a more of general situation. So increase the effective training montage by an amount, or by a larger amount if the current adventure is a Strahd, Patron Adventure, or variant. So this is a more generalized buff. So you're not dealing necessarily with favored foes. You're not necessarily dealing with armored or hit-based stuff. You just need a bigger buff. You go here. Also, because it's even bigger if you're in Patron Adventures or variants, yay. Yay, right? So you're trying to pick based off your situation here. Yeah, super nice. I'm just going to go the Devil You Know here, because I actually don't know what we're dealing with in this scenario. All right. Enemies in the Mist. This actually adds another role to Ezmerelda, and they haven't added it yet. But technically this makes her a speed champion. Which the role isn't there. And hopefully, maybe we got to remind them to add the role. While Ezmerelda is in the formation, 0 to 2 mist enemies can spawn with each wave. So she creates extra enemies in a wave. That's what makes her, that's a speed effect. When a mist enemy is defeated, an enemy whose type matches one of Ezmerelda's favored foes appear from the mist, and all nearby enemies gain the training montage debuff. So she creates her own favored foes, and it's a way to spread her debuff to groups. So you can see the mist coming out. Well, I got a bad wave there, but There we go. So once you pop the mist bubble, if you want to think about it that way, then the enemy appears, and then you have to kill. See, it's a zombie, and then you have to kill it, and then if there were enemies around them, it would apply that debuff. So it is a speed feature. They just have not added the speed roll yet. Hopefully soon. Item-wise, pair of damage all champions items. We get training montage. We get preparation. We get the spec choices, and we get ultimate cooldown reduction. All really great stuff. Again, you want that ultimate. That ultimate is destructive, folks. It is super destructive. It's literally a I want to clear this level button for me. Is like let it stack up. Can't kill the boss? Fine, hit the button. Well, there went the boss. He just blew up because the debuff. It's a big single application debuff. It's big. It's big. We've got damage all champions items, and then we got some unique stuff. So Ghosts of the Past, threat tracking gains an extra stack for each favored foe killed. So if you're really just going all in on building up threat tracking to its cap, you go for it, right? You know, remember that's the one that builds up during the adventure with a max of 100,000. You can add more stacks to that, and you know what? When it's capped, switch to a different feat, right? We've got 1, 2, 3 favored foe feats. Now, these specifically, if you did not unlock Ezmerelda in her event and complete all 4 tiers, you're out of luck until her event returns. These are her tier rewards, tier completion rewards. I think it was just actually the first 3 tiers. So there's one for monstrosities, there's one for fiends, and there's one for humanoids. So she can really stack up to 4 favored foes, and you can ramp up your stacks real quick, and then you can always switch to something else, or swap in between them for specific bosses, right? We got training montage, we got preparation, we got the spec choices. Then she has a grievous wounds feat. So this increases damage of all champions. That's nice. It's a good buff. But then it makes it so Esmeralda's attacks prevent the target from healing. This is a Strahd killer. That's the way I like to think about it, because Strahd, in the kind of the Barovia section of the Sword Coast, when you're fighting Strahd, when he hits the party, he heals. And it makes him very tough to beat. Well, this negates that completely and allows you to kill Strahd. There are a lot of other bosses in the game that have that healing. Well, I shouldn't say a lot. There are a number of noted bosses that are always a pain, and this just negates it completely, and it's fantastic. It's fantastic. All right, that's Esmeralda. Let's talk about Gromma. Gromma's been around a while, and I don't just mean that because she's 80. I mean, Gromma's been around in this game for a while, and she's always been consistently great, but she got a rework recently, just like Esmeralda got a rework. Esmeralda was around, and she just got stronger. All of the reworks lately have made the champions much better. Much better. Gromma is a female turtle druid. She's lawful neutral. She is DPS tanking and support. She does this in a very mix and match way. She isn't all of these things at once. You kind of choose how you want to use her. Okay. Her base overwhelm is just 20. That's your tank. One of your tanking features. There's a number of enemies that you can tank without starting to take extra damage, like above and beyond the damage they're normally doing. Slow and Steady is her base attack. It is a melee attack. This is her initial functionality is melee. Gromma, moving faster than you would expect for an 80-year-old turtle, stabs the closest enemy with her spear. Because of course she does. Of course she does. Her base buff is called Grandmotherly Love. So Gromma increases the damage of all other champions proportional to their age. The buff starts at an amount. Whenever I say at an amount, it's because that amount varies based off your upgrades and your gear and stuff. And so, yours number is going to be different from mine. For every 10 years younger than 100 the champion is, the buff is increased, and it stacks multiplicatively. So the younger the champion, the stronger the buff. Right? Which is great. It's great. All right, then we go dive into start specialization. So she's going to have 2 different sets of specializations. And you're really choosing how you want to use her in the formation. And you're mixing and matching kind of effects to create the scenario that's going to help you the most. So we've got Circle of the Mountain, Circle of the Arctic, or Circle of the Swamp. Circle of the Mountain, Gromma increases the damage of neutral champions, neutral on the good and evil axis, so someone that says lawful neutral, chaotic neutral, or just neutral, that's who she's buffing. 5% for each enemy that has spawned, and boss enrage stack in the current area. So the more enemies that spawns, it caps at 100. The more enemies that spawn, so the longer it's taking you, the more she's buffing. And it stacks multiplicatively. So you can get up to 100 multiplicative stacks. But it's only going to buff that neutral DPS. Okay? So this is very specific to who your DPS is. The DPS you're going to use. Circle of the Arctic. Gromma now casts Sleet Storm on enemies when she attacks. So she still spears them, but she also gets a magical secondary feature. This causes the targeted enemy and all nearby enemies to take additional damage from all attacks. So this is an AoE debuff. This is an AoE debuff. Right? Circle of the Swamp. Gromma's damage is increased by a large amount. It's a percentage of the highest grandmotherly love buff she's applying to another champion in the formation. This is Gromma DPS. Okay. Generally speaking, these first two could be, either one could be the tanking feature. Circle of the Mountain reads more like other tanks' ramping buffs. But either of these could be used in a tanking spec. Circle of the Swamp is her going DPS. Either of these could be tanking or support, but this is specifically her becoming your DPS. And generally speaking, to do this, you want someone in the formation, you want a support champion who's young, like Diana, who would be getting the max buff. And then she makes it, and then Gromma's Circle of Swamp makes it even bigger. Okay. We're not really building anything specific here, so I'm gonna go with the Arctic for now. Hardened Shell, this is just another base ability. Gromma has a Hardened Shell, reducing the overwhelm damage she takes from all sources by 25%. So she has a 20 overwhelm. Most champions have 25. Most tank champions around 25. But she's just going to reduce any damage from overwhelm by 25% when she gets overwhelmed. So another survivability feature if she's tanking. Right? Ancient Heroism is health share. So regardless of what specialization you're choosing, she's gonna share her health with the rest of the party. Running with the Youngins. The effect of grandmotherly love is increased by an amount for each champion in the formation who's younger than Gromma. It doesn't matter how much younger. They just got to be younger than 80. And it stacks multiplicatively. So again, another reason she likes to be with champions who are younger than her. And she's going to increase her buff for that. Right? Her ultimate is called Wall of Stone. And it's literally what it sounds like. A wall of stone bursts up out of the ground under a random enemy. The random part is the annoying thing, I'll be honest. The targeted enemy and any enemies in the column that the wall appears in take damage and are knocked backwards. The wall lasts for 15 seconds, and for that time, enemies cannot pass it. There it is. You can't see it. We're on a stone, and it's a wall of stone. But it's right here, in this front line, and nobody could go by it, even if they weren't dying immediately. When you change an area, it would go away. Second spec choice. So this is where we're going to lean in to whatever you've decided you're going to do with Gromma, right? If you've made her a DPS, you need to lean into that. If you've gone with one of those kind of support-ish features, now you have to decide, do you want her to go all tank or all support? Stone Skin, Entanglement, and Melf's Acid Arrow. Stone Skin increases the effect of Hardened Shell by 100%. So instead of a 25% reduction from damage from overwhelm, it becomes a 50% reduction. Right? So makes her much more survivable only when she's overwhelmed. But you've got to remember, her overwhelm is 20. She has to be able to live through tanking 20 enemies to get overwhelmed, and then she'll start taking reduced damage. And then it's just the reduced to the overwhelm damage, which is a bonus damage above regular hits. So keep this in mind. Enemies that attack Gromma are impaled by her spiked shell, instantly taking 10 seconds of bud damage. So you hit her, she hits back. way stronger than your DPS. 10 seconds of Bud damage. Bud, for those who don't know, and we'll talk about this again real quick, Bud is base ultimate damage. It is literally the damage per second of your highest hitting champion. Most champions in this game have a base attack speed less than 10 seconds. So if you're doing if enemies that hit Gromma are taking 10 seconds of Bud damage, she's hitting them harder than your DPS is. Okay? So if they get to her, they take way more damage, and that may be what kills them, right? So really neat, but obviously that's a tanking feature, right? She has to get hit for that to happen. So this is her in the front line tanking. Entanglement, the effect of Gromma's chosen... Well, actually, I'm going to take that back. This is not her in the front line taking. Generally speaking, this is her in the front line taking. Again, there are bosses who can AoE your entire party. And you can put Sunskin on her against those bosses, and they will still take that damage. It is interesting. So anybody who's fought Valendra Shadowmantle knows that she AoEs your whole party, and she's armored. This would do... Gromma wouldn't even need to be tanking. It's just she's going to get hit. Valendra would take 10 seconds of Bud. Okay. Entanglement. But generally speaking, it's frontline. Entanglement. The effect of Gromma's chosen circle specialization is increased by 100%. And enemies damaged by Gromma have their movement speed and attack speed halved. So this is a buff to whatever your first spec choices were. And a crowd control effect, because they're going to slow down and they're going to attack at half speed. I use this a lot. I love that survivability feature, and I love that I'm buffing whatever I was doing the first time, right? I'm going all in on whatever my first spec choice was, and I'm making my formation more survivable. Melf's Acid Arrow. This replaces Gromma's base attack. So she becomes a magic ranged attacker at this point, or a magic attacker. I shouldn't conflate those two. She becomes a magic base attacker in this specialization. After hitting its target, the arrow explodes. So hits, then explodes. So it damages its target and all nearby enemies for an additional 5 seconds of Bud damage. This used to be like this doesn't have to be you choosing to make her a DPS. Remember. You know, if you chose that DPS spec in the first one, you could do this one, and then she becomes an AoE DPS. But because it's doing 5 seconds of Bud damage, she can do this in a support spec too. And Bud damage means enemies are going to be taking Bud damage 5 seconds. That's a good chunk of damage, equal to or greater than what most DPS are doing, which means she can shred armor from this without them having to hit her. She can shred armor from range. Super cool. So again, you've got lots of options here with Gromma now to really specialize her, and specializations, for the situation you find yourself in and the formation you're in. Item-wise, we got Running with the Youngins, Damage All Champions, Grandmotherly Love, the first specs, so the circle specs, ultimate attack damage, ultimate cooldown. Feats, Damage All Champions, Health. You need that for a tank, right? And she's got a 60%er that's an epic, so yeah, that helps her live through taking all of that damage if you're putting her in the front line. She's also got self-damage stuff if you're making her your DPS. And I have run Gromma DPS and enjoyed it. Good Kids changes the buff target for Circle of the Mountain to good champions, because remember, it was neutral before. So if your DPS is good, you can still use Circle of the Mountain and buff with that spec, with this feat. Grandmotherly Love, Running with the Youngins, Intelligence. This qualifies her for Patron Strahd. And then there's Overwhelm feats. Yeah, I just haven't bought the other one. Then we get some other stuff down here. Power from Art increases damage of all champions by 80% for each pigment applied to Gromma. Remember, pigments are, there's support, DPS, tanking, and healing pigments in the game. She has a DPS tanking support. So if she got fully pigmented, she would have 18 of them, which would give 80% times 18, which would be a pretty big support buff, right? More than she's got the higher level circle stuff. All right, that's Gromma. Let's talk about one of my favorite new champions. A member of what I refer to now as the Holy Trinity. Duke Ravengard. Duke Ravengard, I know a lot of people are like, he was in Baldur's Gate 3. He's an absolute adversary. No. Duke Ravengard's been around a long time. He's coming in specifically out of campaign books because he has been in part of D&D for a long time. He just also happens to appear in Baldur's Gate 3. So, male human fighter, lawful neutral, pure support. Pure support. Base attack is melee. Melee's a big deal for him. Duke's longsword. Duke Ravengard attacks the closest enemy from one hit with his longsword. Ultimate attack. Duke's fire shield. Duke Ravengard's magical armor ignites in flames for 20 seconds. That's quite a while. Causing any attacking melee enemies to take damage. Now, they don't have to be attacking him. You'll see where the wall goes in front of the party. So melee attackers take bud damage. And because he's on fire, when he hits things, they take bud damage. The amount of damage starts at 20 seconds of... oh, no, wait. No. Lasts for 20 seconds. Hold on. They didn't put this in the game. I've got it over here, though. I've got notes. It starts at 25 seconds of bud damage. Now, remember when I said 10 seconds from Gromma is bigger than any DPS hits? Duke's 25 seconds of bud. So it's whatever your bud is times 25. Way bigger than any. He becomes your DPS for a moment. So as long as you have a solid DPS, suddenly you're just wrecking everything. Anything that's melee attacking you gets wrecked. Like here. There's what the fire looks like. Any melee attacker getting up here is going to get wrecked. And anyone he just walks out and he just jumps out and smacks is going to get wrecked. It's a big deal. It's a lot of damage. I was like, are you sure is 25 seconds right? And it gets better. We'll talk in a bit about how it gets even better. Oh, it's a big deal. So right off the bat, you know Duke's coming in hot, right? Pun intended. His passive ability is critical hit, so his base chance to crit hit is 20%, whereas most champions is 2.5%. So crits are a big deal for him. Marshal of the Flaming Fist, Duke Ravengard gains a command stack for each champion with a melee base attack in the formation, and it includes himself, so he can have up to 10 stacks. Each stack increases the damage of melee base attack champions by an amount, and it stacks multiplicatively. So Duke Ravengard wants to be in a mostly melee formation, or at the very least, you only use Duke Ravengard when your DPS, your primary DPS, is melee. Period. He's not going to do anything for anyone else. They've got to be melee base attack, okay? But the more of them, the better. Critical teamwork. Whenever a champion with a melee base attack gets a crit, increase the effect of Marshal of the Flaming Fist by 50%, and additively increase the odds of all champions in the formation getting a critical hit by 1%. Both effects stack up to 50 times, but reset when they change areas. So the longer we are sitting on an area, the more of a chance you're going to have of getting a crit, right? And there, we got one. Now, our chance to crit has gone up, which means every melee champion's chance to crit has gone up, which means we're going to start critting more often, and more often, and more often, and more often, because it's just going to keep going up. It's just going to keep going up. It can add up to a 50% crit chance to all melee attack champions. Well, actually, it's 50% crit chance to all champions in the formation, excuse me. But again, your primary DPS should be melee, and that's what we're hoping for, right? Otherwise, it's not going to matter. Position of power. Duke Ravengard increases the effect of the outgoing positional formation abilities of all champions with a melee base attack by 25% for each command stack. Stacks additively. This is a nice bonus feature. I consider it a bonus feature. Yeah, because mostly I'm worried about making sure my primary DPS is melee, and that I have a lot of really strong support champions that are melee. The fact that they, if they also have positional formation abilities, wonderful. But boosting crit chance on my melee DPS is my primary focus. So this is kind of a nice bonus. And again, if you have two options for melee support, and one of them is just formation ability, so generalized, and one of them is positional, but they're equally strong, you're going to want to go positional because of this, right? That's how you're informing your decision there. Spec choices. So again, this is kind of going to be about what... Well, one of these is about what you're trying to do, and another is about who's in your formation. So lead the charge. This is about what you're trying to do with your formation. When Duke Ravengard gets a crit, he follows up by bashing the enemy with his shield, knocking it back a short distance, so he gets a small knockback. When this occurs, all melee champions adjacent to him get to attack for free. They get their base attack cooldowns reset, so they all get to attack right after that for free. So extra attacks, but it's only on a crit. But again, remember, he can build up his crit, and effectively, you can get to a point where he's critting almost all the time. So if for some reason you're just trying to get lots of attack speed, like lots of hits, or you need that knockback, lead the charge. If that's what you're trying to do. He has to be placed in a position where he's surrounded by lots of melee attackers, though. One of them needs to be your primary DPS. Strength of Baldur's Gate. Champions with a melee base attack have their crit chance additively increased by 20%, and their crit damage increased by 1,000%. Not gonna lie, I use this one almost all the time. Because of the way he feeds crits to everyone. He boosts everyone's crit chance by 20. And then, remember, then he'll add another 50 on it, up to 50 on an area. So basically, he can give everyone, all the melee attackers, because that's usually what I care about, 70% crit chance and 1,000% increased crit damage. Yes, please. I like that one a lot. I use it a lot. I use it a whole lot. Legacy of Ravengard. So this is your nod to the absolute adversaries. If Will is in the formation, because Will's last name is Ravengard, that's the Duke's son. Anyone affected by Will's folk hero benefit gains an additional stack, but the maximum remains at 4. So Will's folk hero is one of the biggest buffs in the game, and it's based off the number of stacks you can get. And everyone really wants 4 stacks. So putting the Duke in with his son basically gives you a free stack. It is very hard to get 4 stacks on Will in a lot of situations. There are only a few champions that can get there with a solid formation. So this gives you some freedom to build up a free stack, or just to add another stack to someone, even if they're not getting. Even if like your best formation involves Duke and Will, and this is just adding, they would have had 1 stack before and now they have 2. I mean, you're doing better, right? But really what this is just a way to free up and add another stack to hopefully get you to 4 max. To 4 max. All right. I think that's it. I mean, that's enough, quite frankly. But wait, there's more. Increased damage of all champions. There's a pair of those. We've got Marshal of the Flaming Fist. That's the big one. Critical teamwork. Ultimate attack damage and ultimate cooldown. Now, the ultimate cooldown is important, so you can spam that OP button more often. Ultimate attack damage, though. Remember, the damage off the ultimate attack is 25 seconds of Bud. It's not a fixed value. This is buffing that value. As if it wasn't strong enough. As if it wasn't one of the strongest damage-dealing ultimates in the game. They gave it an item to make it stronger. What? Confirmed, this does raise the number of seconds. This goes against the number of seconds of Bud. So I'm at 1,279%. I don't even know what that works out to. How many seconds of Bud is that? It's a lot. It's a lot, folks. I'm not even going to do the math. It's a lot. What? Duke's one of the strongest, if not the strongest, champion to be added to the game recently. Damage of all champions feats. We've got one, work together increases the max stack of critical teamwork. I love this one. You can see it's slotted. That's because it makes that 50% crit chance that he can give everybody. It turns it up into 60. Basically gets 60 stacks, which makes his buff stronger too. It can take him to 100% crit chance with the spec that I'm in now that gives him 40 base. So he's always critting. And he can pass 60% to everybody else. I like it a lot. I love Duke. I love Duke. We got Marshal of the Flaming Fish. We got Position of Power. Critical Teamwork. We got an Int +2. This qualifies him for Strahd, right? There's a Tadpole. So if you are doing an absolute average series formation, you can get a Tadpole to add. Duke's pretty great. Let's talk about Diana next. Diana, this is her default skin. It's not, folks. This is her default skin. Diana joins us from the Saturday Morning Squad from the 80s cartoon. Currently, that's only Diana and Presto, but since it's an affiliation, we can take from that they're going to be adding more of the kids from the cartoon. Female human monk, lawful good, support, and speed champion, and she's a pretty great speed champion just right out of the gate. Base attack is melee. Diana attacks a random enemy with her javelin staff. And Javelin Staff is her base ability. Diana's base attack, Javelin Staff, knocks around enemies she hits based on where she's positioned in her column in the formation. If she is at the top of a column, she knocks them down. She'll knock the enemy down. If she's at the bottom of a column, she'll knock them up and back slightly, down and back slightly. If she's in the middle of a column, she knocks them straight back. Now, if this is the only placement in the column, I believe she knocks them straight back. But this is a good way to manipulate enemies. This is a good way to manipulate enemy movement. Because usually what happens is when she knocks them down, then they will pass to the lowest tank champion. And when she knocks them up, they'll pass to the highest. So you can manipulate where the enemies are going with this. Okay, it's pretty cool. Spec choice, first spec. She has a couple of them. Acrobatic Assault, Modest Might, Fledgling Fury. This is based on who is in your champion, or who is in your formation pool. Which champions are in your formation pool. So we can either increase the damage of all champions with Dex 15 or higher. We can increase champions with a total ability score of 78 or less, or we can increase the damage of champions that are 20 years or younger. Now, these numbers down here make it look like you want to pick the one with the most numbers. That's bait. That's wrong. None of this matters. Those should be names, because you need to pick who your primary DPS is. So, yeah. The number doesn't matter. There's no multiplicatively stacking, and we're talking about the damage of all champions, yes, but with a dex score of 15, right? So you need to figure out who your DPS is here, okay? Second spec choice, Ensemble Cast or Spotlight episode. So with Ensemble Cast, she increases the effect of Inspire, so that first specialization choice, by a large amount for each champion it affects. So now you need to know how many there were, but it tells you here. We didn't need to know it before, but now we do. It could be semi-useful before, but names would be more useful, right? So, stacks multiplicatively. Spotlight episode, she increases the effect of Inspire by a much larger amount for each champion it doesn't affect. So again, you really just base your first choice on your DPS. You have to, or else she's not buffing them. And then you pick the one that has the bigger number on this time around. Okay. We'll be right back. So this is a nod to being from a cartoon. She increases the speed of area transitions by an amount that caps at 400%. I'm capped. Area transitions are anything from the point where you kill when you complete the quest, to the point where you start attacking on the next screen. And normally people think of that as the screen wipe, right? That black screen wipe. But it's literally anything that happens between the point of completing the quest and sending out your first attack, everything in the game speeds up during that period. It's fantastic. It's fantastic. It's a great speed effect, and it caps fairly easily. Electrum Chest Scavenger. So her and Presto are both scavengers. Shout out to Strongheart, who made an appearance on the Saturday morning cartoon, also a scavenger. Scavengers collect things while you play. So Diana collects Electrum chests. So from boss loot bags. All the stuff is boss loot bag stuff. While the cap is not reached, Diana has a very tiny chance of scavenging an Electrum chest each time a boss drops a bag. The cap for the number of chests you can loot goes up by 0.5 every day, which means every 2 days you can loot another Electrum chest. I think I'm capped. I'm at 59. It doesn't show us the 0.5, so you just have to know that every 2 days you can loot another one. Which is great. For new players, it's amazing, because the more Electrum chests you can get early on, the better, right? But it's just good overall. I mean, Electrum chests never go out of style, in my opinion. And her ultimate is... wait, but Javelin Staff Throw. So she throws her Javelin Staff, which deals ultimate damage 10 times to random enemies and stuns them, everyone that it hits, for 5 seconds. So you get a 10-hit ultimate, which if you're dealing with an armored boss, could potentially remove 10 chunks. And it's a stun. And it's a stun. So here's what it looks like. Boom! It goes out, bounces around until there's no more enemies on the screen. Or it's hit 10 times. Right? Gear-wise, damage all champions, then it will be right back. That's the speed effect. It does have a cap. Notice I am not at my cap, but I am at the speed effect cap. We'll get to that in a moment. Inspire specs, ensemble cast, ultimate attack damage, ultimate cooldown. Feats, damage of all champions, specialization boosts, the Inspire specs. Will be right back. So these are speed feats. She's got speed feats. The way she works is if you have the speed feats equipped, you get to your cap without having to cap the item. A lot of people don't like this. A lot of people think that means that when you do cap the item, then the speed feats are wasted. Well, I mean, sure, but most people that play this game don't get to cap the item, and instead they can slot. It's much easier to get to those speed feats and get a lot of boost out of her. I like them, but it sounds like they're not going to do this again. And I don't know if they're going to change her or leave her. We got Ensemble Cast the Spotlight feats. We've Int +2, so qualifier for Strahd. This is a big one in my opinion, because speed champions, you want them everywhere that they can go. She's got some base attack cooldowns, speed feats. Again, enemy manipulation if you want to do that. There is even an 80% speed feat. I'm capped. I don't even have that one. Right? Yeah. Diana's pretty great. Last champion we're talking about today, Penelope, Half Pint. Or as we like to call her, Penelope. I should also mention Esmeralda's nickname, Ezmerelda, because of that easy button at the ultimate. Yeah, they're pretty great. Penelope is a female halfling druid warlock. Chaotic good, healing, support, gold, and debuff from the Heroes of the Plains streamiverse. This is a full affiliation currently. Her base attack is Go Away. Penelope jumps out and hits the closest enemy with her staff, dealing damage and knocking it back slightly. Tiny little knockback for a tiny little halfling. Base ability, Have You Met My Friends? Whenever Penelope attacks an enemy and doesn't kill it, again, she's a support, so she shouldn't be killing it, but that's a whole thing, because she actually hits pretty hard. For the next 30 seconds, all champions deal a lot more additional damage against them, so it's a debuff. That's her debuff, folks. Insect Plague. Upon entering an area, Penelope summons 4 medium-sized, randomly positioned insect swarms on the enemy's side of the battlefield. Enemies who are in a swarm are slowed by 100% and are afflicted by the Have You Met My Friends debuff, so she doesn't even need to hit them. They get debuffed when they move into the area. The slow effect can stack multiplicatively if an enemy is inside multiple swarms, and because they're randomly placed, that can happen, but don't rely on it. Every second an enemy is in a swarm, its slowing effect is reduced by 1%. So the longer they're there, the less it affects them. When the slow effect reaches 40%, the swarm is dispersed and it disappears. Here's what they look like. They're these big pigpen-like clouds in different places. And once an enemy hits it, they slow down a lot. And see how they get randomly placed every time you're in a new area. But eventually they could go away. And we'll talk about what happens after that in a bit. Chewinga Mask. When an enemy enters one of Penelope's insect swarms, Penelope dons her Chewinga Mask, calling an elemental friend to her aid. It sits on her shoulder while her mask is on. All champions adjacent to Penelope at this point will gain the following charm based on their tags, and that means role tags. So are they healing, support, gold, whatever, it's the roles. Charms last until the party changes areas. So, healing charm. Penelope heals affected champions by an amount every second. This is specifically if on tanks, I believe. And tools for the job should be everyone else. Penelope increases the damage of all champions by 400% for each champion affected by this charm. So, she wants to be surrounded by as many champions as possible that are being affected by tools for the job. Right? Because this stacks multiplicatively. Specialization choices. This is more buffs. Well, more debuffs, technically. So keep your friends close, keep your future friends closer, and everybody gets to be friends. This is a situation where you're looking for the largest potential boost. Based off the number and multiplied by the, it's multiplicatively stacking, so you're going to have to do some math. So keep your friends close it boosts have you met my friends. That's what all these buffs, the have you met my friends debuff. For me, 1789. Large amount for each good champion of the formation, stacking multiplicatively. 1879 or 1789, well, whatever. The keep your friends close is the largest potential boost. So it's nice when you have lots of good champions, right? Keep your future friends closer is if they're evil. It's a buffs of a smaller amount per stack. So you got to do the math here, because obviously if the good number of good is greater than the larger number of evil, you're going good. But sometimes the number of, if it's equal, it's but still better to go good. And then you got to figure, well, how many more evil champions do you need to beat the good number? You got to do the math. Everybody gets to be friends, just increases the effect by a much smaller amount, but just based on the number of champions in the formation. So if you're running a 10 champion formation, you'll have 10 stacks of this. And a lot of times this one, because it's usually always 10, 9 or 10, is better than these unless you really get hyper-focused into one of these. Got to do the math yourself. Got to do the math yourself. All right, let's talk about the second spec real quick, too. This is about what happens when the insect swarms disappear. Because they will eventually disappear if it's taking you a while to defeat. If lots of things are streaming in, or it takes a while to get through and you're doing knockbacks and they're walking in and out of it a lot. So, Fury of the Fireflies. Each time one of Penelope's insect swarms is dispersed, the effect of Chewinga Mask is increased by 200%, and it stacks multiplicatively, but resets when you change areas. So remember, there's 4 swarms, so you could get 4 multiplicative stacks. Splitting the Hive. Each time one of the insect swarms is dispersed, another smaller swarm appears randomly, preferring to appear on an enemy if possible. These smaller swarms damage enemies, 15 seconds of bud damage, and slows them using the same rules as the original one. These smaller swarms do not spawn additional ones when they disperse. So you don't get a persistent effect, but there is a small period of time where they will do 15 seconds of bud damage basically every second that something is in them, it feels like. Right? So this is persistent boosts that grow. This is a short-term damage. Okay. Dance of the Ladybugs. Each time one of Penelope's insect swarms is dispersed, Penelope reduces the cooldown of all adjacent champions' ultimate abilities by 25% of its remaining cooldown. So if for some reason you just want to be able to trigger ultimates faster, 4 times, get a reduction 4 times, you go Dance of the Ladybugs. I tend to just Fury of the Fireflies and go with it, but there's reasons why you might choose the others. They're going to be very specific and specialized to what you're doing. Story time. Each time a champion adjacent to Penelope attacks, so again, she wants to be surrounded by a lot of champions, add a stack of story time. The party's gold find is increased by 1% for each stack, stacking additively. Storytime stacks are capped at 1 EO9. That's a lot. A billion? It's a billion. It's a lot. Whenever a boss enemy enters an insect swarm, the number of storytime stacks are increased by 2.5%. This is her gold find boost, and it's huge. It has the potential to be huge. People have stacked it up fully. I never have, and she's still huge. I think the most I've had is like 1 million, and it was still huge. What you want to do is you do want these additive stacks while you're pushing through early on. So having her in for your formation early is good. Surrounded by a lot of people, so she can build up these single stacks, right? But then, you know, you want that solid base so that then when you get to the part where the bosses are then strong enough to move into those swarms, you're then getting big bursts of 2.5% boosts each time instead of just 1. That's how it stacks up the quickest. It's a super big effect. It just does take time to ramp up. Erupting Earth is her ultimate. A fountain of churned earth and stone erupt under the nearest enemy, dealing area damage in a large radius and creating difficult terrain that slows enemies in it by 50% and lasts for 30 seconds. This is unchanged. So there's what the difficult terrain looks like. Yeah. That's unchanged. So she is just a crowd control queen. Items, damage of all champions, have you met my friends, Chewing Mask, specifically healing, then Chewing Mask buffing. Then spec choices for, what kind of friends you have. And then ultimate cooldown. Feats, damage of all champions, gold find. Yay. Have you met my friends? Chewing Mask healing, Chewing Mask tools for the job, the buffing. Story time, more gold find. Right? Specialization choices. And then she has an Aasimar glitch feat and skin. So she can count as an Aasimar with this feat in. And this then buffs, have you met my friends, 20% for each good champion in the formation as well. When you put in a glitch feat, it's and. So she becomes Halfling and Aasimar for all those kind of qualifications. All right, folks, that's it. I think we have at least a few questions. We got 4 questions. Really? Come on, folks. We got about the half an hour left in the show ish, a little over half an hour. We got 40 minutes left, 40 minutes, we'll say. We're going to take a short musical interlude. This is the song for Ezmerelda from Bardic Inspiration, where angels fear to tread, and they'll be back to dive into questions.
Purpose burning bright inside my heart. Saw the mentor on my quest, so I could study with the best. Now there's nothing left but vengeance in my car. When fate took my leg, I got up to fight again. Nothing stops me from the task at hand. Now I'm stronger than before. I stand ready for this war. Drive the undead scourge out of this land. Ready lost all alone in this dread domain I roam. Ancient evil hounds me every night. Search across this land. Oh, way to understand how to break the curse and bring back the light. Down to put an end to this fight. I go where angels did a tread. I go where evil goes. I hunt them to the end. Eternal peace for the undead. I'll send them all to hell. It's time to make amends. Time to make amends. The angels did a tread. Send them all to hell. I hunt them to the end.
All right, we're back. I'm like, did I mute the mic? No, okay. We're back, folks. I've got 4 questions from 3 people. Please put question colon in front of your questions, folks, so we can make sure we grab them. I may, if I run it through these and I don't have any more, I'll be trying to scroll back through chat and find something to talk about. Lurking Rider, which of the new champions do you enjoy working into your formations the most? Duke Ravengard. And which of the rework champions do you think got the best deal? Ooh. Huh. I mean, so I always kind of use Penelope. And I always use Gromma. And I think they both just got better. I used Ezmerelda sometimes, like when her niche, when it was undead, and hit based, or segmented, I should say. So usually armor. Then I would break her out. Esmeralda is now just a much stronger. I would say, so she probably wins out. I would say she's just much stronger in general, and also really great when you're dealing with her favorite foes. But she can create them now. Yeah. So I would say Esmeralda probably got the best rework, like the one that really impacted her usage the most. Because I feel like Penelope and Gromma were always solid and just got better, whereas Esmeralda was hit or miss, and now is real solid. Gabalon, there are no drops for this game or this channel. Let's see that. Galon 13. I've been playing Descent into Avernus, and after reaching areas 700 to 710 multiple times, I'm finding it very difficult to progress past that, even with potions. Right? Yeah. Because you're riding your favor. What should I be doing to increase my DPS? Well, see, that's the thing. What you're doing is, this happens. Just about everybody hits Descent into Avernus and has this happen. It's because you're riding your favor. Early on, favor, like in the early campaigns, favor is kind of your biggest way to increase the damage you're doing, right? It's by leveling up your champions. The more you can level them, the more damage they do. But eventually you hit a cap, right? You hit what we call the soft cap, where you can't level up your champions anymore. So in Avernus, this really becomes apparent, because in Avernus you're going much deeper. Like the area goals are much deeper. Like you said, you're in the 700s. But also the favor requirements for blessings are also much, much higher. And so people run into kind of a wall, a progression wall. And it's because they've been overly reliant on favor as their power progression method. Favor is not the only, I call them pillars of progression. Favor is not the only one. It's just the one you notice the most early on. So what else do you have to boost along the way or should you start working on? Well, gear is one, right? Trying to get champions in better gear, or if not in better gear, then adding. If you can't do that, you need to add item levels to them, and this is with blacksmithing contracts. Only do that on event champions, but you want to try to get better, more power via item levels or higher rarity gear. You should hopefully have gotten all of the global blessings from prior campaigns. If not, go back and do deep pushes for favor there and get all 5 tiers of global blessings. You should have by this point unlocked multiple patrons. And Descent into Avernus is a place where there are some what we call efficient patron variants, where you can go to get influence for them and thus get global perks for patrons. That's going to give you more pushing power. You should also, hopefully by this point, have at least one Modron core. You should at least have your modest core by doing Split the Party once. Split the Party requires 2 champions in every bench seat. If you haven't done that, you need to work on that. Because Modron cores are a huge amount of power. A huge amount of power. If you have multiple Modron cores, then you're going to want to pick one to try to get and level up and pipe out. So to epic flow, trying to get full epic flow to as many nodes as possible. It's a whole game. It's we call it the pipe game. This is what it looks like, right? This is a level 15 core that's been piped out in such a way that it's the highest potential, well, that I've been able to make so far in terms of bonuses, right? Can add a lot of power. You're going to want to start, if you're in Descent into Avernus, hopefully you did the storyline first, and if you completed the storyline, then you should be doing Trials of Mount Tiamat. And each week after you complete your trial, you should be putting legendary effects on items on the team that you're using to push with. So whatever your strongest trials team, which hopefully should also be your deep pushing team, normally, you should be then boosting with legendary effects. And also you can start doing what we call forge runs, where you're leveling up those effects by doing a deep favor run. Once you get to the end of the run and have all of your favor, then you need to be boosting power, right? Boosting your legendary effect power. You can also be adding pigments to any epic items, support pigments from the Thayan Enclave, and that kind of stuff. I'm in the middle of the story. Then there's no reason. I don't think there's any. Is there something that's like 700 and before the? I didn't think 700 was an area goal for the storyline. Maybe I'm wrong. But yeah, you need to be doing a lot of that stuff, right? There's all of these other ways to boost your power. It isn't just about which champions you have and how much favor you have, right? So earning more favor at this point is going to, going deeper is going to require you having other kinds of power, because you're already at the cap for what you can get for favor. And this happens to a lot of people. Check out my new player reference. That should bring it up, I think. Did I hit that right? I don't know. Yeah, there it is. Because that's been updated with my most recent experience on a new player account. And on that account, I never ran into a roadblock in Avernus at all. So, reviewing that, hopefully, from top to bottom, just kind of review all that and see if you've done all of the things and stuff, and maybe that'll help. But it really is about getting more power in more places. Zinger, all things being equal, 4 stacks folk hero versus his crit spec on a melee heavy team. Does one do more than another? So you're talking about Duke Ravengard and choosing the specialization choice. If you're using Will and you weren't already at 4, if you were at 3 and it would get you to 4, that's the bigger deal. It's a huge buff. When I said folk hero can potentially be the biggest buff in the game, I meant it. And that's way more than just having more crit chance. Way more damage than just having more crit chance. Another stack of folk hero, even if it isn't 4. If it's taking from 1 to 2, that's the better choice. If it's taking from 2 to 3, better choice. 3 to 4, better choice. 0 to 1, shouldn't be happening, right? Really shouldn't be happening. Honestly, even if they have 1 to 2, there might be a better buffer than Will, right? So you got to figure that out. I don't actually build Will in my Duke Ravengard formations because my Duke Ravengard formation is a Holy Trinity formation, which for me is Karlach, Duke Ravengard, and Strongheart. That's the Holy Trinity. They are just because when you get them together and you see the destruction they create together, you go holy, and then you have to mute yourself. This is the Holy Trinity. So, and I've taken that on stream into the 1950s, so 1950 plus, where then you're falling over from the damage you're taking, not because you're not doing lots of damage, without will. So yeah, you don't necessarily need will, but if you want, you can, right? Beverheim, will Esmeralda's favorite foes also drop extra quest items when Dynahair is in the party? If that's what Dynahair says they'll do. Right? That's a Dynahair thing. Where is Dynahair? Oh God, where is Dynahair? Wasn't she in? Oh, here she is. She's in 3. I mean, that's let's go see what Dynahair says. All favored foes have a chance to drop double quest items. So yeah, any favored foe. But again, that's a Dynahair thing. So it does say all favored foes. So it doesn't say her favored foes. It just says all favored foes. So yes, it would. It would. Why am I here? What are the best good melee armor breaking DPS champions? The only armor breaking DPS champion in the game is Binwin. But you said, well, I'm going to go with best. He's only. You did have good here. He's not very good. I mean, I think he's lawful good, alignment wise, but Binwin's not great. But he is the only one that, as a DPS champion, takes he when he hits a segmented champion, he takes multiple segments off. Yeah, don't think about that. You're not really trying to build necessarily that. You just want strong melee champion if you're building. Strong champion if you're building. If you're trying to add to an extra credit person, and usually what you're looking for is champions that do multi hits, but not always, right? Like a lot of times, like I like to run. Like I said, I like to run Karlach. She's a single target DPS champion, which means when I'm up against an armored enemy, it takes a while to get through them. So then I like having like an Ezmerelda in my party, a Human in the middle, or a Celise with that multi-credit functionality, because then Karlach can get through it much quicker. But it would go through even quicker if it was a multi-hit champion, right? Like if it was a Shara sending out, even just 3 attacks, and I were getting 12 credit on each. Well, that's 36 chunks off in one base attack. 2 attacks from a Shara, 2 rounds of attacks from a Shara would clear an armored boss, right? So you kind of got to. I look at building on strengths of my DPS champion, and also negating weaknesses. So when you have a single target DPS champion, you negate their weakness is getting through armored enemies, and you negate that weakness either through armor shred, like extra credit, right, or via having support champions that are doing bud-based damage or creating bud-based damage for the team. Because that bud-based damage, as long as my main attacker is hitting hard, that bud is high enough to remove an armor segment. More people doing bud-based damage then shreds that armor, right? So you can build a super strong formation even with a melee DPS, even if they're not great at breaking armor. As long as they're doing tons of damage, they're removing a single segment. You have other ways to get rid of the rest, right? Oh no. Sandbox JJ, when are you getting a champion in the game? I I, I appreciate you asking. Probably never. I've been doing this for almost 7 years now. People have been asking, when is Gaarawarr getting a champion? Forever. Usually the content creator champions are done for marketing reasons to get more people in the game. Everybody that knows me is playing this game already. Well, not everybody, but most of the people that know me are playing this game already. So, yeah. Lurking Rider had a similar. If Bandy was in an adventure party, Bandy is a character I play on a live play TTRPG show called The Affairs of Wizards over on the Dungeon Scrawlers channel. Bandy is a dwarven finger waggler, which means he's a wizard. If Bandy was in an adventuring party with all of these champions, who would he think is the least trustworthy? Bandy doesn't look. I mean, look. Everybody will turn on you for the right amount of money. That's just the way humans are, or not even humans. That's just the way people are. Like that Bandy is just untrustworthy. It's not even any of these. It's just even Penelope's super nice, and if he'd be like, when she at some point, this is a scam, right? She's gonna lure me in. At some point, she's taking my stuff. Like, it's just gonna happen. It's just gonna happen. Upgrade. What is an ideal spot formation to farm murder stacks with the Dark Urge? Oh. I've heard conflicting reports. Normally, when you're farming kills, you want what I call a Chumbawamba variant. And that's a variant that has enemies that when they get knocked down, they get back up again because you're never going to keep them down. And it's usually a cooldown. Like the best one has like a 5-second cooldown, which basically means the Dark Urge in the AoE spec jumps out, murders them all. They fall down. 5 seconds later, they get back up again, and then he does it again. And when you build up that kind of group, you go to that kind of variant, you can basically get 100 enemies on the screen at once, all in a little group. And every 5 seconds, you're getting 100 credit. And then you just stack up speed potions, right? That's usually the best case scenario. However, if you've done all of those, or if for some reason, because I've heard reports that some of those variants aren't giving kill credit appropriately lately, you might have to go to a place like Mad Wizard that has an enemy spawner. Like there's a portal and enemies just stream out of it. And then you add lots of champions that speed up spawn rate and increase the number of enemies that spawn. So like Melf can increase the number of enemies that spawn in a wave. Tatiana can grab lots of enemies with Find a Feast. You got like Whittle and Deacon that can increase how fast they're loading into the screen. Anything that creates extra enemies for the Dark Urge to murderize, then on a spawner area is going to be like the fastest scenario for you. After the Chumbawamba. Appalling. How do I stop trying to brute force content with champions based purely on affiliation? Start experimenting with mixes. Like, you're just going to have to start mixing other champions in and looking for. Again, I think if there's a DPS champion you really like, start trying to find champions that really complement them. And that isn't always affiliation based. So I've gone through kind of maining lots of different champions in my history in Idle Champions. I think the first time I was ever a main, I was a Strix main. And I have evolved through all kinds of things. Some of my mains aren't even DPS champions anymore. Ripnarak. But right now I'm a Carlock main. And so I just want to build the best Carlock formation I can build. And in reality, because of how Carlock functions, that doesn't necessarily involve absolute adversaries. Her Ceramorphosis ability doesn't affect her damage. So it doesn't make her a better DPS. So I have some absolute adversaries in my formation? Sure, but it's because they are solid choices for buffs and functionality, right? So building around kind of, if you want to kind of pick a DPS champion you like and try to build around them, that's great. Just make sure you also have some options to go to when you can't use that DPS. Aggie Jess, what gameplay mode is your favorite? Trials, variants, patron variants, and why? It's funny. I don't really see them as gameplay modes. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, variants are my most enjoyable thing to do, just because if they've got a good puzzle to solve, because they're all basically puzzles and you're solving them with your champions. But usually my favorite variants so far have been evergreen unlocked ones, because those are the ones they tend to go really hard on and create really cool situations. So yeah, I mean, obviously it's variants. Patron variants are just the harder versions of that. So I don't really look at them as different play modes. It's just all stuff to do. I don't know. Not like a game that has like, here's PvE and here's PvP and then here's like sieges, and like those are kind of play modes, right? To me, I don't see this game this way, so it's hard for me to answer that. Puny Adore, considering the Holy Trinity, who could potentially be the fourth best champion to sport Karlach, Duke, and Strongheart? Do I have a Karlach formation here? Kinda do. So I use, if you see down here in the push group, I do use Lae'zel, and she fits in with Duke Ravengard. I do use it's Penelope sometimes, but not always. So I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of different champions. I've got a range champions in here. I've got a Astarion. I've got Caddy Bree. I've got BBEG. It's really just who's going to buff Karlach the best in any given situation. But other notable champions that aren't here, Ezmerelda, or Akira. We've got Gale in that slot instead because it's a 3-tank front line here. Miria, right? Like, there's just options, and it depends on what I'm dealing with. It's a Holy Trinity specifically because those three synergize well. Like, it's the pairing of Duke, Ravengard, and Strongheart that creates this incredibly strong melee synergy and crit-based synergy. Strongheart boosts attack speed based off how often he crits, as well as damage boosts, and then of course Duke Ravengard increases the number of time you can crit and boosts melee champions. So then you add in any melee DPS. For me, it's just Karlach, and suddenly everything just goes wild. Especially because Karlach builds her rage stacks based off attacking and being hit. So I'm getting melee boost, I'm getting crit, and I'm getting attack speed and buffs. And it's just making Karlach just on animation speed, just, super fast attack. Beyond that, it's just who's going to buff the best. Again, negating weaknesses by adding armor, the people that you're giving her extra credit armor is fantastic, but ultimately I'm just trying to do as much damage as possible. Rayane, question, champ speed abilities don't work in background parties. Correct. What about speed potions? They do. However, I've on any account, even here, I've got hundreds of speed potions. I have never been like, I'm going to go spend speed potions in a background party. There are people that do. I feel like they must have way more speed potions than I have, because I always feel like I'm running low. And on newer accounts, I'm always out, it feels like. So I would never spend them in the background. But that's me. But they do work in the background. I am toast. And Trials, after you've done your daily challenges, doing additional free plays, take the health down faster. Not really. On day one is when you want to get your highest amount of damage possible, and that might take 2 runs, because your damage contribution is additive. But it is additive, right? So like on day 1, I got to 631 DPS. Well, that's basically based off hitting a bud that was up real close to this, and then doing it consistently so that it kind of added up to 631. But, if your butt is 600, you got to hit a lot of times. It's 1E600. You got to hit 100 times at that to get to 601? Isn't that how it works? So you're getting very minimal contribution after that. So it's really about spiking your butt as high as possible. And it might take you one run to get some favor, and then the second run to really maximize your contribution on day one, because that's the easiest day. But after that, you're just going to whatever the minimum area goal is and completing, because the big boost is this bonus DPS you're getting as a reward. You're not going to really be able to change this number much at all anymore. Like a handful of bonus DPS doesn't really mean anything. And the extra days, because the restrictions stack up, in most cases, you're not going to be able to push as far and do as much damage anyway. Not always, but... So it really doesn't matter. If you can set a good, solid contribution on day one, and then hit all of your daily goals after that, you're gonna be fine. On my most recent new account, I pushed all the way through tier 6, and I think I could have done tier 7. I was solid contributor all the way to tier 6, and my car lock had 5 blues and a purple, but average item level 50. Right, as did the most of my pushing group, in terms of average item level. Some had better gear than others, and I was putting legendary effects on and raising legendary effects. Like I could have kept going all the way to tier 10, I think, without any issues. Without necessarily needing her to be in full epic gear, right? It's about doing those dailies, making sure you're getting a good initial contribution, and then go from there. Devik, if the champions got to race in F1, I enjoy F1, folks. I'm looking forward to this weekend. Who do you think would be the fastest? Also, is Xander Idle Champions Lance Stroll? He probably is. Honestly. He's just he's there because he kind of can't be removed, which, he's either Lance Stroll or he's Yuki Tsunoda. Which champion would be the fastest? I mean, over a short distance, it's Briv, right? I don't know. It's one of those things where like Diana, I feel like would be fast in the corners, right? Like, and Briv has the most potential to be fast, but you got to really invest a lot of time and energy in him. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Gale and I have Duke, Ravengard, Karlach, and Strongheart. Who works well with them? Whoever your best buffers are after that. Honestly, those three together, and then just give them the best support you can. Those three together are huge, in my opinion. I do on this account. That's what as the core of my formation. But then also on my, Thalora's a sprinter. She would win the sprint races, but I don't know if she would do the regular F1. But on my new player account, I was like, hey, I got those three, and then it was like, who are my best buffers after that? Is really just, at a certain point, it's like you got to make sure you got solid tanks and then just solid support, but those are your core, right? Big Carl, I'm making a list of all champions that have the forge bonus damage of all champions by 100%. Does everyone need the same favor to level the bonus, or is it random per player? Now, all of the leveling, all of the upgrading is the same, regardless of the bonuses. Yeah, it's all the same. Captain Wiggly, the only thing stopping me from actually playing this game is cross-save between PC and mobile. It's never going to happen. You're like, why? You can go ask them why. They'll tell you. They'll go into it. I'm not actually a developer. I'm not a full-time employee of Codename Entertainment. So the rest of your questions, look, the rest of your comment, you're in so many games, so obviously not platform prevention, like so many people say. Look, that is not entirely true. It's not. Here's the thing. It's in so many games because they get a contract. They have to get a whole different contract with those platforms. They have to set things up differently. Platforms do not like to share revenue. Xbox does not like you buying stuff on their store and then going and playing on PlayStation. And then PlayStation, they like you buying stuff on their store. PlayStation then doesn't like you then playing on their platform, but with stuff you spent somewhere else. This is the problem. So there's different kinds of contracts with different percentages and cuts that have to happen if you want to do crossplay. For some games, it's totally worth it, especially multiplayer competitive games or multiplayer cooperative games. You want the largest potential pool of people logging in and being able to play and do like multiplayer stuff together. For those games, it's usually worth a different contract. Okay? This is a single player game. There is cross-play cooperative interaction without needing that contract because they're not transferring any data. It's in Trials of Mount Tiamat. But there's no cross saves. I can't play my game on Steam and then go play it on Xbox. It doesn't make sense for them to do it. There's also a lot of technical hurdles on the studio side, and they've talked about this a lot, that, yeah, that's a factor because they've tried this before. It is a big factor. You have to have all of your pushes, all of your patches at the same time, and that also means any fixes have to wait for the slowest platform because you can't just fix things quickly on all platforms. You have to follow their protocols. So yeah, challenging to do. And part of it, yes, is that the studio would have to push patches on all platforms at the same time. And that's a big headache that you're creating. And if you're not a game that relies on lots of population to make, like, working together to do something, it's not necessarily worth it. Not necessarily worth it. So that's why we're probably never going to see it. This is a single player game. Zinger, my Carlock is stuck in all blues. That's not a problem. What's the best way to get her epic? Patron chests. Yeah, it's patron chests at that point. Time gates. If you're early on in the game, you still want to just keep Pokemoning and collecting as many different champions as you can. Later on, after you get like 100, after you've unlocked 100 champions, if you want to just try to use time gates also to full epic event champions, sure, but usually it's patron chests early on. But again, all blues is strong. At that point, what you need to be worrying about increasing are her average item levels. I pumped my new player Carlock up to 50, average item level 50. And then just making sure that on the champions that you're supporting her with that do have epics, that you get legendary effects on them and you're ramping those up. Your power can come from all kinds of places. It doesn't just have to be the rarity, right? If I had kept playing that account, I've shelved it. If I kept playing, I would have next target would have been average item level 100 for her, right? And that would have been a lot more power. But I was breaking, even in 5 blues and 1 purple, with 50 average item levels, I was, with my team, I was breaking E300 DPS. I was clearing E300 DPS. So that's a lot of damage for that was an early mid-game account by that point. Nerfy, should I use some blacksmithing contracts in Carlock to get her to 50 average item levels? If you're using her as your primary DPS, yeah, I think that's... Whoever you've decided to go in on as your primary DPS, your first target is getting them to average item level 50. Second is 100, but that's after you get all of your party up to 50. Then you'd go to 100. And that is also after getting your speed champions at least to 50. Yeah. Any speed champions that have item support. Firefly Kari, any suggestion on souling Tiamat's stronger version? Yeah, don't. You're creating an artificial difficulty system, so if that's what you want to do, just know you're only going to be able to go so far. because it's solely going to be based off your personal damage contribution and then doing all 7 days. It's just math at that point. So the only thing I could tell you is, man, you better have some solid teams. They better be in good gear, and they need to be epic. You're going to have to get them full epic because you're going to need all the legendary effects, and you're going to need to raise them. Start working towards like legendary level 20, but you raise the whole thing at once. You go, to 5s, to 10s, to 15s, to 20s. Maybe you'd solo. I don't know if it's possible. I've never done that math. Valdemar, have you ever run a trials group with only your accounts? No, because I only ever have like 2 that I'm working on at any given time. There's my main account and then whatever my newest new player account is, and I've never tried to put them in the same group because my main account is on tier 10, and the furthest I've ever gotten a new account is this most recent run. It's the strongest account I've ever created. I didn't use any giveaways. It was all just events 2.0 world, and the collections and everything, all of these current systems and sources of power. And I cleared through tier 6 and would have cleared tier 7 too, at least. So yeah, never quite got to the point where they would be in the same place. And I'm out of questions, which is good because we're almost out of time. This is going to be the last stream of the weekend. Streams will resume on this channel on Tuesday. Tuesday is usually the first day of streams for the CNA Games Twitch. However, I will be over on my channel in about an hour-ish. I gotta go get lunch and eat it. So whenever I'm done with that, I'll be back on my channel. You can click my name in chat, twitch.tv/Gaarawarr. I play Idle Champions there on Mondays and Wednesdays. A little show called Idle Chatter. I also make some of my guides there. If you're wondering why I do a tutorial show, I have over 170 guides over on the subreddit wiki. You can find a link to that by putting, I can put a link to that in chat as well. Garg_guides at any time. But I also stream other games. Right now, I stream a variety of different games, and we're playing kind of an RPG / strategy / roguelike game called For the King 2. We're having a lot of fun doing that. We'll be playing more of that this afternoon. Last couple of questions, and then we got to get out of here. Captain Wiggly, is a player considering any words to put me in the right direction? Huh? I don't know what that means. Yeah, I don't know what that means. Did I miss some other context? I have no idea. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. If we're still talking about the cross save thing, it's probably never going to happen. They talk about this pretty transparently on Dev Insights if you want to talk to the devs about it. Stigler, I wonder if when I do at the moment around 4,000 zones per hour is a cap, or it's possible to do without scripting more. Oh, you're talking like speed stuff. I don't know. People don't do areas per hour. They do BPH, which is either bags per hour or bosses per hour, and I don't even do that. That you have to use external website tools to access your account stuff, and I don't like doing that. As somebody who's worked in the games industry, I was always told, no, never, don't do that, because usually I'm using official accounts, but so I tend to stay away from it. I just try to figure out how many average gems per hour I'm getting and go for there. So I have no way to know what's going on there. Yeah, what I can tell you is you don't need to script in this game to get incredible speed and incredible return from gem farms. Final question, and then I'm out of here because we are done. Valdemar. Oh, well, no, I guess people can stop asking questions, people. We're done. I'm out of time. Games got to go. It's their weekend. Valdemar, the champ bonuses from beating tiers will be back the next time that champ comes around. Correct. We'll be able to play for chests for tier 4 completed champions. No. The way events work is once you complete that content, once you've completed an event variant, it's completed forever. So it's done. if you complete all through all tier 4, like I have on this account for everyone, if you complete all 4 tiers, the next time around, you work on your new champion, and whoever you didn't flex and do theirs tier stuff, the only thing you could get is if you flex that. Like if I were to flex Strongheart again next year, I'd gain access to all 4 of their buffs again instantly because I'd already earned them. I have to flex them to get that. And then I'd get access to the ability to buy chest packs for them from the shop, right, with tokens. But yeah, that's the way it works. And Hakachuk with the last question. I'm hitting 900s in tier 3. I have enough for over 20 chests. Who would you recommend? Do you think any would help push? I mean, really, like, you're looking for specific epics. Strongheart's Righteous Might is his really strong ability. I don't know if you pick Strongheart. Depending on who else you flexed, I have no way to know. But it's more you're hunting for a specific epic and hoping you get that epic than anything else. Otherwise, clearing 1,000s is blacksmithing contracts, average item levels, Modron, your Modron core, and legendary effects and that kind of stuff, right? All right, folks, we're going out with... It's a song for Penelope Halfpint. Look, we can't have a Penelope episode and not have her song on it. This is Won't You Be My Friend, the red guitar version, because that's the best version. Enjoy. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Won't you be my friend? One without a fear. I've got a hand to lend. We'll be smiling through the air. They call me a half-pint sprout, but I want you to know, my friends say there is no doubt that I'm a whole hero. My love for adventure, second to none. So if you come along with me, we'll have lots of fun. Won't you be my friend? One without a fear. I've got a hand to lend. We'll be smiling through the air. Remember when things get dark, I can be your light. When you're ready to disembark, I'll be there to fight. I'm going to mold the earth just to give you a hug. And when there's a storm outside, we'll be snug as a bug. Won't you be my friend? One without a fear. I've got a hand to lend. We'll be smiling through the air. Our friendship is strong and we'll never part. Saving the world with the power of our heart. I'll never say goodbye, 'cause friendships never die. Braving the world with the spirits high. Won't you be my friend?